Before we get into tonight's story, I want you to take a moment and think about the last time you ordered food on your phone. You probably swiped through a few options, tapped on your usual order, and then tracked the little car icon as it made its way to your house. It's a mindless, modern convenience, a background process to our daily lives. You get your food, the driver gets a tip, and you both move on. Two strangers whose paths crossed for a few anonymous minutes. For the person in our story tonight, we'll call him Jack. That routine transaction went horribly wrong. Jack was a delivery driver, and he thought he was just bringing someone their late-night meal. He didn't realize that he was the one being delivered. This happened back in the late summer of 2019. I was 20 years old, going into my junior year of college, and like every other broke student, I was working a gig job to cover rent and beer money. My chariot was a beat-up 2007 Toyota Corolla that smelled faintly of old French fries and desperation. And my employer was one of those food delivery apps, you know the ones. DoorDash, Uber Eats, it doesn't really matter which. For the purposes of the story, let's just call it Fetch. I worked the dinner rush and the late-night shift, mostly because the tips were better. You get a lot of drunk people ordering entire feasts at 1 in the morning. And they tend to be generous. The nights were usually the same. I'd put on a long-form podcast, something to fill the silence, and just cruise around the familiar grid of my city, picking up bags of food and dropping them on porches. It was monotonous, sure, but it was easy. It was safe. That feeling of safety is something I think about a lot now. How quickly it can be taken away. The night it happened started out no different from any other. It was a Tuesday in early September. One of those nights where the summer heat still clings to the pavement long after the sun goes down. It was humid and heavy. I was getting tired, thinking about calling it a night after one more delivery. My phone chimed. I glanced at the screen, expecting an order from a downtown apartment or maybe a dorm. But this one was different. The order was huge. 2 large pizzas with everything. 4 orders of wings. A couple of 2-liter sodas. Cheesy bread. The works. It was from a place called Luigi's Old World Pizzeria, a local joint on the edge of town. The payout was what really caught my eye. The subtotal was over $100, and the preset tip was another $50. A $50 tip for a Fetch driver. That's like finding a unicorn. My exhaustion vanished, replaced by a jolt of adrenaline and dollar signs. I tapped accept without a second thought. That's when I saw the address. It was way out, deep in the rural county west of the city. I'd lived in the area my whole life, but I'd never been out this far. The map showed it was a good 25-minute drive from the pizzeria, down a series of winding country roads that looked like scribbles on the screen. The delivery notes were simple, almost curt. Leave on front porch. Do not knock or ring bell. Tip is in the app. A little weird, maybe. Most people who live that far out are used to giving directions or mentioning a landmark. But for a $50 tip, I'd have delivered it to the moon. I figured it was probably some rich guy who owned a big plot of land and didn't want to be disturbed. Maybe he was having a party. Or maybe he was just a serious introvert. I didn't care. I drove to Luigi's, the familiar voice of my favorite true crime podcast host droning on about some cold case from the 70s. The guys at Luigi's knew me. Big order, Jack, the owner said, hefting 2 heavy, fragrant bags onto the counter. Going a long way out. Huh? Yeah, someplace off Old Creek Road, I said, balancing the soda bottles in a carrier. Guess they were hungry. He grunted. Not much out there but trees and old farmhouses. Be careful, roads get dark. I laughed it off. Got my high beams. Thanks, man. The first 10 minutes of the drive were normal. I left the city glow behind, the streetlights becoming fewer and farther between. The podcast kept me company as I turned off the main highway onto the first of the country roads. This is where things started to feel different. The road narrowed, and the canopy of trees overhead became so thick that it blotted out the moonlight. It was like driving through a tunnel. My headlights cut a lonely cone of light into an oppressive, ink-black darkness. My phone, plugged into the charger and sitting on the passenger seat, suddenly went silent. The podcast had stopped. I glanced over. The screen showed, no service. It wasn't a huge shock. I was in the middle of nowhere. Still, The sudden silence was jarring. The only sounds now were the hum of my engine and the crunch of gravel under my tires as the pavement gave way to a dirt road. The air coming through my vents, which had been artificially cool, now seemed to carry the damp, earthy smell of the woods outside. It was a heavy smell, the smell of wet leaves and soil. I leaned forward, squinting into the darkness, my hands tightening on the steering wheel. My GPS was still working. Thank God for offline maps. But the little blue dot representing me was crawling through a vast, featureless green space. According to the app, I was only 5 minutes away. The road got worse. It was less of a road now and more of a suggestion of 1-2 dirt ruts overgrown with weeds. My Corolla's undercarriage scraped against the high ground between the ruts, making a cringe-inducing screech. I slowed to a crawl. This was insane. Who orders $100 worth of pizza to a place you need a Jeep to get to? The first real seed of doubt, the first red flag, began to plant itself in my mind. Maybe this was a prank. Some kid's getting me to drive all the way out here for a laugh. But the $50 tip, the payment had already been authorized. It had to be real. Finally, my GPS announced in its robotic voice, "You have arrived." I stopped the car and killed the engine, letting my eyes adjust. There was nothing, just the dense, black wall of trees and the narrow dirt track I was on. I turned on my interior light and looked at my phone again. Zooming in on the map, the pin was right where I was. Then I saw it, through the thick brush to my right, set back maybe 50 yards from the road, was a house. It wasn't the country estate I had imagined. It was a silhouette, a dark shape against a slightly less dark sky. It looked small, derelict, a single-story farmhouse, the kind that had probably been abandoned for decades. The roofline was crooked, and it looked like part of the porch was collapsing. No lights were on, not a single one. There was no driveway, just the overgrown path I was on. The only sign that this was the right address was a mildewed wooden number, 481, nailed crookedly to a large oak tree next to the track. This was wrong. Everything about it was wrong. My heart started to beat a little faster. My brain was screaming at me to just turn around, to forget the tip and get the hell out of there. But another part of me, the part that didn't want to look like a fool or lose that money, kept trying to find a logical explanation. Maybe they were asleep and just wanted to get the food in the morning. Maybe the main house was somewhere else on the property and this was just a weird guest shack. Maybe they were just strange people. The instructions were clear. Leave on front porch. Do not knock. I took a deep breath, the damp air filling my lungs. Okay, Jack, I muttered to myself. Get it done. I grabbed the pizza bags and the sodas. The smell of hot pizza was almost sickeningly out of place in the cold, musty air. I got out of the car, and the world went completely silent. No crickets, no frogs, no night sounds at all. It was a dead, heavy silence that felt like it was pressing in on me from all sides. My ears felt full, like they do when you're in a soundproof room. The ground was soft and spongy as I walked towards the house. I used my phone's flashlight to illuminate the path, the beam dancing nervously ahead of me. Weeds and thorny vines clawed at my jeans. As I got closer, I could see the state of the house more clearly. The windows were dark, gaping holes. Most of them were boarded up, but one or two were just black, empty squares. The paint was peeling off in long, leprous strips. The front porch sagged dangerously in the middle. I stepped onto the first wooden step. It groaned under my weight, a low, mournful sound that seemed impossibly loud in the stillness. I tiptoed across the porch, my sneakers sticking to something damp and unseen on the planks. I reached the front door, which was scarred and weathered, and carefully placed the bags and the soda carrier in front of it. Mission accomplished. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Now I just had to get back to my car and leave. I didn't run, but I walked quickly, my back prickling with the feeling of being watched from one of those black, empty windows. It was a primal, irrational feeling, but I couldn't shake it. I slid back into the driver's seat of my Corolla. The familiar, worn fabric a small comfort. I slammed the door shut, the sound echoing in the unnerving silence. I took one last look at the house. Just a dark, hulking shape in the woods. I felt ridiculous for being so spooked. I put the key in the ignition and turned it. Nothing. Not a click. Not a sputter. Nothing. The dashboard didn't light up. The radio didn't come on. The car was completely, utterly dead. No, 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 I whispered. I tried again. And again. I jiggled the key, pumped the gas like a fool even though I knew it wouldn't do anything. The car was a brick. The battery had been fine the whole way here. It was an old car. But it was reliable. It had never done this before. Panic, cold and sharp, stabbed me in the chest. This couldn't be happening. My phone had no service. I was miles from the nearest paved road, parked in front of a derelict house that looked like it was straight out of a horror movie. And my car was dead. I took a few shaky breaths, trying to fight down the surge of adrenaline. There had to be an explanation. A bad alternator, a loose battery cable. I told myself I'd wait a few minutes, let it cool down, and try again. Maybe I'd flooded the engine. Even though I knew that wasn't right. I sat there in the dark, my own breathing loud in my ears. I stared at the house, half expecting a light to flicker on, for someone to come out and ask if I needed help. But there was only darkness, only silence. The minutes stretched on, feeling like hours. My initial panic began to curdle into a thick, suffocating dread. The feeling of being watched was back, stronger than ever. I felt like a bug in a jar. I decided to try my phone again. I held it up, moving it around the cabin, hoping to catch a stray bar of signal. Nothing. No service. I was well and truly cut off. I was about to pop the hood, to pretend I knew what I was looking at, when my phone screen lit up. My heart leapt. Had I found a signal? But it wasn't a signal bar. It was a notification from the Fetch app. My blood ran cold. The app needed an internet connection to work. But my phone said no service. It was impossible. My thumb, trembling slightly, swiped to open the notification. It was a new message from the customer. The one I had just delivered the food to. The message had just one sentence. Thanks for coming. Now, come inside. I read it once, then twice. I think I stopped breathing. It wasn't a question. It wasn't an offer of help. It was a command. The friendly, anonymous mask of the delivery app had been ripped away. And underneath was something monstrous. This wasn't a weird delivery. This wasn't a prank. It was a trap. The remote location, the strange instructions, the dead car. It was all planned. They hadn't ordered the food because they were hungry. They had ordered it to get me here. My mind raced, trying to process the sheer malevolence of it. Who were they? Why? The questions hammered at me. But they were drowned out by a singular, overwhelming thought. I was being watched. The person, or people, who sent that message was in that house. Right now. They were watching me sit in my car. They were waiting. My eyes were glued to the dark, silent house. I scanned the black windows, the sagging porch. I saw nothing. No movement. No flicker of light. But I could feel their eyes on me. I was certain of it. The silence from the woods wasn't natural. It was the silence of a predator holding its breath. My car, my little metal and glass shell, no longer felt like a safe haven. It felt like a cage. A display case. My phone buzzed again, the vibration making me jump so hard I hit my head on the roof. Another message. My hand was shaking so much I could barely hold the phone steady. The front door is unlocked. I threw the phone onto the passenger seat as if it were burning hot. This was a game to them. A sick, twisted game. They weren't going to come out and drag me from the car. They were going to make me come to them. They wanted me to walk across that porch, turn that handle, and step into the darkness of my own free will. My survival instinct, which had been buzzing under the surface, now screamed at me with the force of a siren. Run. But where? Into the woods? Into that suffocating, pathless dark, with God knows what waiting in it? Or stay in the car? A locked, metal box they could break into at any moment? A single light flicked on in the house. It was in a window on the right side. A dim, yellow, sickly light, like a single candle was burning in an otherwise empty room. In the faint glow, I could see the outline of the window frame, the grime on the glass. But I couldn't see anyone standing there. The light was just on, as if to prove someone was home. I was paralyzed. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. My breath came in shallow, ragged gasps. I fumbled for the door lock, clicking it down, then up, Then down again. A useless, repetitive motion. The click of the lock sounded like a gunshot in the silence. Then I saw something. A shadow detaching itself from the deeper shadows of the porch. It wasn't a person. It was too low to the ground. It moved with a strange, scuttling motion, like an animal, but it was the size of a large dog. It crept from the porch and vanished into the weeds near the front of my car. I didn't even have time to process what it was before I heard a sound that will be burned into my memory until the day I die. Scrape, scrape, scrape. It was the sound of metal on metal. It was coming from underneath the front of my car. A slow, deliberate, rhythmic scraping sound. They weren't just watching me anymore. They were doing something to my car. Disabling it further? Or was it a message? You're not going anywhere. That was it. That was the breaking point. The illusion of safety in the car was shattered. Staying here meant waiting for them to finish whatever they were doing and then turn their attention back to me. The woods were terrifying, but they were my only chance. I didn't think anymore. I acted. In one fluid motion, I unlocked my door, threw it open, and scrambled out. I didn't look back at the house or towards the front of the car where the scraping sound was coming from. I just ran. I plunged into the wall of trees on the opposite side of the dirt track. The side away from the house. Branches whipped at my face and arms, tearing at my clothes. Thorny vines snagged my legs, trying to pull me down. I stumbled, fell, and scrambled back up, my lungs burning, my own panicked sobs choking me. The darkness was absolute. I couldn't see my own hands in front of my face. I was running blind, fueled by pure terror. Behind me, the scraping stopped. A new sound started, a whistle. It was a calm, casual, two-note whistle, the kind someone might make while walking their dog. It was cheerful and utterly psychopathic in the context of what was happening. It came from the direction of the house. And it wasn't frantic. It was patient. It was the sound of someone who knows they have all the time in the world. The whistle seemed to follow me. Every time I thought I was putting some distance between us, I'd hear it again, seemingly no farther away than before. It wasn't a pursuit. It was a herding. They weren't chasing me. They were just letting me know they were there. Letting me know I couldn't escape. The psychological torture was worse than any chase could have been. I don't know how long I ran. It felt like an eternity. My legs were numb. My face was bleeding from a dozen scratches. And I was pretty sure I'd twisted my ankle. I ran until I couldn't hear the whistling anymore. But the absence of the sound was almost worse. It meant I didn't know where they were. Just when I thought I was going to collapse, that my heart would literally explode in my chest, I saw a light, not the sickly yellow light from the house, but the bright, clean sweep of headlights. I had stumbled onto another road, a paved road. I burst out of the woods and into the glare of the lights, waving my arms like a madman. A truck, a big pickup, screeched to a halt just a few feet from me. A man with a weathered face and a baseball cap leaned out the window. "Whoa there, son, you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." I couldn't form words. I just gasped, pointing back into the black woods I had just escaped from. House, car, He must have seen the pure, unadulterated terror on my face. He didn't ask any more questions. He just said, Get in the truck right now." I scrambled into the passenger seat, slammed the door, and locked it. He hit the gas, and the truck sped away. I stared out the back window, back at the impenetrable wall of darkness, expecting to see a figure emerge. But there was nothing, just the night. The man's name was Earl. He drove me to the nearest town with a sheriff's office, which was about 20 minutes away. He stayed with me while I, shaking and barely coherent, tried to explain my story to a skeptical deputy. They took my report, of course. They promised to send a car out to the address in the morning. When it was light out, the deputy gave me a look that was a mixture of pity and disbelief. He probably thought I was on drugs or had gotten spooked by shadows in the woods after watching too many horror movies. They called my parents, who drove out to get me. I don't think I said a single word the entire ride home. The next day, the sheriff's office called. A deputy had driven out to the location. He found my car, right where I'd left it on the dirt track. The battery was completely dead, which he noted was weird, but there were no obvious signs of tampering. They offered to have it towed. He found the house, the derelict farmhouse I described. It was empty. It had been abandoned for at least 30 years. He said. The windows were boarded up. The porch was collapsing. It was just as I had seen it. There were no lights inside. No candles. No signs that anyone had been living there, or had even been inside for a very long time. They found my footprints leading from my car to the porch. And they found the food. The 2 pizza boxes and the soda carrier were sitting right in front of the door. Untouched. Cold. They found no other footprints. No tire tracks other than mine and the patrol cars. There was no sign of the scraping sound. No sign of the low, scuttling creature I saw. There was no evidence that anyone else had been there at all. The case was closed. The official explanation was that I had a bizarrely timed car failure in a spooky location and my overactive imagination did the rest. The text messages? A glitch in the app. They said. It probably queued them up before I lost service and sent them all at once when I got a flicker of a signal I didn't even notice. It was all explainable. But I know what I experienced. I know the feeling of being watched. I know the calculated cruelty of those text messages. I know the sound of that calm, patient whistle in the dark. The police found nothing. But that's what's so terrifying. These people, whoever they were ghosts. They knew the area. They knew how to lure someone in, terrorize them, and then vanish without a trace, leaving their victim looking like a hysterical fool. I never worked for Fetch again. I sold the Corolla for scrap. I couldn't even stand to sit in it. For a long time, I couldn't sleep without a light on. I dropped my true crime podcast. The stories weren't entertaining anymore. It's been years now, and the sharp edges of the fear have dulled. But they haven't gone away. They've become a part of me. Sometimes, late at night, when my phone buzzes on the nightstand, my heart still seizes for a second. And sometimes, when I'm driving on a lonely road, I'll turn the radio off and just listen. Listening for a sound that shouldn't be there. Listening for a whistle in the dark. I don't know what they wanted. I don't know if they were just a couple of bored, sadistic locals playing a game. Or something worse. And that's the question that haunts me. They lured me there for a reason. They told me to come inside. What would have happened if my car hadn't died? What would have happened if I had been too scared to run? What was waiting for me behind that unlocked door? I have to live the rest of my life knowing that I was at the edge of that answer. And I am eternally grateful that I never found out.